So, hello, my dear children. I'm back again, but this time with a new book titled Footprints Without Feet. I am sure that by now you all are aware of the fact that this is a supplementary reader which is supposed to be read by you yourselves without taking the help of the teacher. Now, why is that so? Well, they say that in a student's life, it is always better to develop your reading habit. When you do that for pleasure or for information, you tend to read critically and also develop the confidence to ask and answer questions. If you look at your text, what you will get to see is that each story begins with questions under the head read and find out. Now, read and find out means after reading, you will be able to find out yourselves. So, that is done so that you get to progress on your own. Also, what you will find as you read the lesson is you will get to see another subheading titled Think About It. Now, that has been created or made so that you all, after reading the story, are able to, raise questions that are open ended and thought provoking. So, we hope that after reading the stories in the book, you will, get involved in critical thinking and reasoning and also develop new ideas and knowledge. And at the end of the story, what you'll get to see is a list of suggested readings. Now, that has been done so that you are encouraged to read further on your own. And it has also been done to promote the habit of self-learning and also reduce your dependence on us, that is the teachers. We know that language is a skill that we need to hone or improve or polish, not just for our use in the classroom, but also for our use in the real life. So, what I am going to do for you is, in order to make it easier for you all, I am going to narrate the story and I'm going to try to put in as many pictures as I can so that it will be easier for you all to understand the story. So why wait? Let us start. The first chapter of this book is titled A Triumph of Surgery and has been written by James Herriot. Herriot was born in the year 1916 in England. He began his career as a veterinarian in the year 1940. That same year, he began a 3-year stint in the Royal Air Force, returning in 1942 to continue providing care to animals, mainly cattle and work horses. In 1966, at the urging of his wife, Herriot attempted to write a number of different books pertaining to football, but none received any interest from publishers. In 1969, he decided to turn his attention to writing about his life as a veterinarian. The next year, his semi autobiographical book, All Things Great and Small, was published and it became a success in both the UK and the US. His works were mainly a collection of connected short stories that painted a picture of everyday life in England while using animals and veterinary care as a focal point. So, this story titled A Triumph of Surgery revolves around three main characters. Number one, Tricky, a small dog. Number two, his mistress, Mrs. Pumphrey, who is super rich and who pampers Tricky so much. And the veterinary doctor, Dr. James Herriot. So, in the beginning of the lesson, we get to see a worried and troubled doctor. He's troubled because he is shocked at seeing Tricky, who is supposed to be a small dog, turn into a fat creature who now looks less like a dog but more like a bloated sausage. Seeing this hideous sight, Dr. Herriot inquired about Tricky, and then he was told by Mrs. Pumphrey that because Tricky had suddenly become listless, she felt that perhaps he was suffering from malnutrition, and so she had started feeding him with malt and cod liver oil and even Horlicks, so that he would get ample of rest at night. And during this, the doctor further inquired as to whether she had stopped feeding him with sweets and cakes, to which she replied saying that she was never able to do that, as it broke her heart refusing food to him. Then the doctor asked her if he was involved with any kind of exercise or not, and there too Mrs. Pumphrey said that he wasn't, and that the only exercise that he actually took part in was the walks that Tricky and Mrs. Pumphrey sometimes took. So this really worried the doctor, and so he advised Mrs. Pumphrey to ensure that she cut down on his meals, and she involve him in some or the other form of exercise. So having said that, they parted ways, and one fine day Mr. Herriot received a call from Mrs. Pumphrey, who said that Tricky had suddenly become very lazy and had become so uninterested in things, and that he kept lying all day on the carpet, and that he also had some bouts of vomiting. So Mr. Herriot had expected that to happen, considering the fact that she had been overfeeding him. So the only solution that he saw at that moment was to get Tricky admitted in the hospital, and so he already had made his plans, and he also took a phone line. So he said that Tricky needed to be admitted in the hospital for a fortnight, and this suggestion made Mrs. Pumphrey almost devastated, because she thought that both she and Tricky could not live without each other for even a single day. And but she had to finally give in to the doctor's request, as she knew that Tricky would be safer in the doctor's hands. So Dr. Herriot went to Mrs. Pumphrey's house, wrapped Tricky in a blanket, and took him out of the house to put him in his car. And there, he saw the maids putting Tricky's things in the car. Everyone was in tears, and so the doctor took the dog away in his car to the hospital. When Harriet reached the hospital, other dogs surrounded him. They sniffed Tricky and showed no interest in him. Till 2 days, Harriet did not give him anything to eat. Instead, he gave him a lot of water to drink. Then, slowly, the doctor started giving him some light food. He gave him no medicine at all. After 2 days, Tricky had started taking interest in his surrounding. He started doing so by mixing up with other dogs and enjoying being rolled over. He then became a member of the dog gang, and we know that at home he had almost no exercise, but at the hospital he started getting involved in a lot of running about and fun-filled activities. Then the doctor also controlled his diet and ensured that whatever he ate was healthy. Now, Mrs. Pumphrey was always anxious about Tricky's health, and she always used to, call the hospital and inquire about Tricky. The doctor told her that he was getting better, and this made her think that maybe he was getting better because he had undergone a surgery. So she started sending 2 dozens of fresh round eggs, wine, and brandy for Tricky so that he would recover soon. On seeing all these things, the doctor was shocked, because wine and brandy for dog was something that he had never imagined. So what they did instead was, they did not want Mrs. Pomfrey to feel bad. So instead, that is the doctor and his junior, they started enjoying 2 eggs every day, along with wine in the afternoon and brandy in the evening. It sure was a temptation to keep Tricky on as a permanent guest, as the doctor and his juniors had really enjoyed the eggs, wine, and brandy. However, the doctor did feel a little guilty about the fact that Mrs. Pomfrey was, suffering, and so he finally decided to call her and tell her that the little dog had recovered and was awaiting collection. Within minutes, a car appeared before the hospital gates, and they could see Mrs. Pomfrey, nervous and lost inside the car. She was nervous because she was tense and worried, as she did not actually know whether Tricky was really all right or not. But later, when the doctor brought Tricky, he was so excited to see his mistress that he jumped at once into Mrs. Pomfrey's arms and started licking her. She was excited and surprised to see all this, and It was a very happy reunion. And as the car moved out of the hospital, Mrs. Pumphrey, out of gratitude and excitement, took out her head from the moving car and thanked Mr. Herriot for everything that he had done for her and Tricky, and said that it was indeed a victory of surgery. So that's the end of the story. Here, what the author is trying to tell us is that we should not spoil anyone by giving too much of things. In our life, also, what we get to see is some parents overindulge their kids, as in they try to meet their demands, and they try to fulfill whatever they desire for, which is actually not very good, because they say that over pampering leads to destruction. I hope you liked the story. Thank you.